Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good friend, Ty Franck. I love you, Ty. We are playing. This is the Pulp Fiction of podcast. We're playing with the how timing and how things go, and we started with a preview, and now we're jumping into the podcast. And we're doing it live. We're coming to you live.
Except we're recorded and edited, but
right, we're recorded live. We're recorded live, coming at you live.
Is there another way to record?
That's like in Dumb and Dumber when he's like, "Yeah, I bought 3 in case something happens to 1." And it's like, why not the? You bought okay. What about the okay? How you doing, Ty?
I'm tired, but other than that, I'm all right.
Yeah, you've been working late.
A possum crawled into my backyard and died, so I got to go out later and pick him up with a shovel and toss him into the woods.
Oh my God, can you bring your camera out and we can come with you, like us, the Expanse and our legions of fans? Can we come with you and see this process?
See me pick up a dead possum?
Yeah, because I have a feeling that you guys might be having possum soup tonight.
No, this guy had a rough night. He definitely looks like something took a bite out of him. And we've got bobcats around here and we've got coyotes around here. So I think either a coyote or a bobcat got a piece of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's
not a werewolf.
No, the bite is too small for a werewolf.
You know what's funny is like you watch more horror than anybody I know. You read more horror than anybody I know. And I watch a bunch of horror and it kind of bleeds into my consciousness. So like my mind always goes in. Does it ever happen to you? Like if you hear a noise at night, like a whole movie plot just flashes before your eyes about like what it's
not so
be?
Much anymore. But when I was a kid, definitely. I had hidden weapons in my room in case some shit went down.
Because I'm always like, my kids wake up and they're like, they're scared of monsters and everything. And I'm always like, there's no, don't listen. I understand there's no monsters that I'm telling them. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I that dad in the movie that's like not believing their kid that, when there is a real monster that's there or there's actually somebody, am I the dad that's like not believing in the dark force that's there?
And you know what happens to that dad, right? That dad gets taken out by the monster.
Yeah, I know. So I'm always like, no, son, there's no monsters, there's everything. But then I'm like, I'll hang out. Like, I'll say, all right, you guys go to bed. And I'm hanging out by the door and I'm like peeking in and make sure and be like, you're not going to get me, fucking monster. But also, too, because, I wonder because when we do story time and stuff, every time I'm telling a story, like I make up a story, it always goes real dark, real fast. And so I'm like, am I putting these things into the kids? And every time when I'm like, oh, they're old enough to watch this, like we watched Gremlins, and I was like, oh, they're old enough to watch it. And that shit gets, it pushes the envelope on scary with that age.
Yeah,
or I showed them Conan, and the scene where the spirits were showing up and trying to take them and they're staked to the ground or whatever. They're like, I don't know about this, It was like, we just watched the amputation scene and we're doing episode 4.
Yeah, season 6, episode 4, Readout.
Season 6, episode 4, Readout. And we just watched the amputation scene. And my question, was that scene in the books?
No.
And so my question to you is like, that's one of my favorite scenes of the season. And what went into the construction of that scene? What were you serving in terms of like you creating that scene, the purpose of it within this episode?
So in the books, Drummer in the show has sort of taken over a character in the books named Michio, who she's in the books. Michio is the one who's sort of the pirate queen of the belt.
Mm-hmm.
And Drummer has sort of taken that role on. But in the books, when Michio turns on the OPA, turns on Marco's rebellion, it costs her. She has a bunch of ships and she has a large family like Drummer did in the last season, with like many husbands and wives, and it costs her. She loses some of the ships. Some of the people she loves get killed. And so Drummer's family in the show is much smaller than her family in the books. And so we had a conversation about how can we show that this decision to turn on Marco is going to cost her something. And we didn't want to just kill one of her remaining spouses off. We didn't want to just kill Sam or Vanessa. So this was the compromise. This was to show that the decision she made is costing her things, and not just randomly kill off one of the people who's left.
And how did you choose Sammer? Were you like, all right, he's going to get his arm amputated when you're doing the thing?
Because he was the one who wanted to be a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
When you decide to be a warrior, there are potential consequences of that. You and I were just talking about, some of the things that happened in the military stuff in the Middle East in the recent years. That decision to be a soldier is it's very brave, and it's not without possible consequences and costs. And so when Sammer's like, I'm going to be a fighter now, I'm going to be a warrior like you, that carries some potential cost with it. Vanessa's the one who stays on the ship. She's the healer. She's the medic. So it seemed like a pretty obvious choice.
And in some ways, with him getting his arm trapped and going through what he went through, it seems like it brings more suffering to Drummer. It really serves that purpose, because let's say that he just died instantly. Something happened and he died. Obviously, that's going to be catastrophic. But being in the presence of somebody that you love suffering so intensely, and then seeing another person you love suffering because they're going to have to do something like horrible, if I had to do something like that to somebody that I loved, I mean, I would have an easier time doing it to myself. I would have an easier time amputating my own arm than amputating my wife's arm. I don't even know, like, if I could possibly do that. And
well, if I ever have to saw your arm off, I will make sure that Jen is not in the room.
You just saw my arm off one day, and I'm like, I'm not even stuck. What are you doing? And you're like, I'm just showing you that I would totally saw your arm off as a friend if you were caught. And I'm like, yeah, but I gotta at least be fucking stuck.
You're like, oh man, I stubbed my toe. I'm just like grabbing a hacksaw. That foot's coming off.
You're so like ready to saw it off. I'm like, look, Ty, I'm bleeding inside my nail, and you're like,
I got a splinter.
Yeah, cutting that shit off. You're like, I told you, man, I'm here for you. I could saw a buddy's arm off easy. I could saw Joseph's arms off.
Yeah,
no problem. Yeah.
Damn.
But I think I'd have a hard time sewing.
Well, who would edit the show?
You would learn how to do it with your feet.
Haven't you ever seen my left foot? Did you see what Daniel Day-Lewis? Did you see what he pulled off? All right, so stop your fucking whining, okay?
Yeah.
Jesus. You're like Sammer in that scene, just fucking screaming up a storm. It's like, we get it. Your arm is... Drummer had her spine crushed and she didn't cry as much as you. God. I guess he learned that he didn't have what it takes to be a real warrior. No, I'm just kidding. That was a great scene. I really enjoyed that.
Like everything, you script something and then you run up against the limitations of actual physical production, and you always wind up with the smaller version. It was not quite as dramatic and elaborate as initially scripted, because we had to get it down to something that we could make and not run out of money.
The drummer speech in this is the one where drummer has that speech to Marco, where she goes on the thing. Did Abraham write that?
He did.
Yeah.
No, Daniel always writes all the speeches. I believe he wrote the final version of it. But so this season, more than any other season, was sort of gang written.
Uh-huh.
Dan Nowak and Daniel and I and Narain wrote every scene of every episode this season. And we kind of split the episodes up. So I don't remember who wrote like the first draft of it. And I think Daniel wrote a draft of it, and Narain, as the showrunner, has the prerogative to make any little tweaks that he wants to make. So I couldn't say with certainty who wrote the very, very final version of it, but I'm pretty sure that Daniel wrote at least one draft of it.
Speech was, tailor-made to fuck with Marco. It's just a really well-made. It's like really understanding Marco and what's really gonna, you're nothing. We're here, we're defying you, and you can't do shit to us. And
with Marco, you go for his ego,
right?
That's like if whenever you used to play Nintendo games, and then like you were fighting the boss monster, and it would have like a glowing red spot on it, and that's the spot you were supposed to shoot.
Yeah,
Marco's glowing red spot is his ego. If you can hit that, you just fuck up his whole world. Because like the thing that he sees as his great strength is a huge weakness for him. And Drummer knows that. She goes right for it.
Do you ever confront somebody in life, like an old boss or somebody, and you just in something about like, and you take that person and put them into a character? Like there's something about them you're like that you remember about them, whether you like or hate. But in this situation, like things that like, have you ever came across somebody I'm like, I fucking hate this person. I hate the way they talk, I hate they move, and they end up becoming a character that you can end up just fucking torturing?
I think pieces of people wind up in characters. I've never taken a whole person and jammed them into a character, but Daniel has.
Mm-hmm.
There is a character in the books who, at least in the books, Amos kills, who dies very horribly in the books.
It's very cathartic for Daniel.
That Daniel named after a doctor that he hates, and gave him that personality, him that doctor's personality. Yeah. And I think he found it very cathartic to have Amos blow his head off with a shotgun.
What was the inspiration for the man with the cat in the scene? It was kind of like he was the representative of the belt, kind of the human side, the face that Monica was focusing on.
I don't remember where that first came from. I know. So in the books, the war, of course, is much more compressed in the TV show because everything has to be, right? In the books, the war goes on for quite some time. The war between the Belters and the Inner Planets, it's long, it's drawn out. There's many engagements in it. One of the things that Holden starts doing just on his own is he's like, we need to put something out there that lets because we've all sort of decided that we're different things, and we've forgotten that we're all humans. So let's put something out there that people can watch that reminds everyone that the people that they're fighting are other humans, not some alien species or something. And so he starts just making these little, think of them like YouTube videos of like, he interviews a Belter about some Belter culture thing, or he interviews an Earther about some Earther thing. And like, he just starts doing that and putting it out into the world. And I know Narain really loved that part of the story, but we couldn't find a way to have Holden be doing it because Holden is off having space adventures on his ship and doesn't have a lot of time for that. So at some point the decision was made, well, that sounds like a thing that Avasarala would commission to be done. And we have this character that we've been bringing through all the seasons now at this point of Monica, who's the reporter. And so at some point somebody had the idea, hey, let's just have Avasarala commission this story thing where like, hey, let's show the Belters that Earthers are people too, and have Monica do it. And what Monica does in typical Monica fashion is not do what Avasarala told her to do, and instead doing reports on, hey, you shouldn't be killing Earthers because Earthers are nice. She does reports on everybody shouldn't be killing everybody, and does that interview with that Belter on series. And that's sort of how that evolved.
Did you see the Vietnam documentary that was done by
the Ken Burns?
Ken Burns. That's probably one of my favorite. I love Ken Burns. It's probably my favorite Ken Burns documentary. Probably one of my favorite war documentaries. Either that or Peter Jackson's World War I one. And one of the things that really moved me is seeing the other side, having the Viet Cong and them having interviews about their experience in the war and what they thought of us, and what they were told about us, what it was like confronting us in the jungles. And I grew up with me and my dad used to love war movies. We love World War II movies, and it's so easy to kind of get into the movie logic of what war is, and you start to kind of see the other people as the enemy, and you don't really connect to their humanity and identify with them as human beings. And every now and then you have these reminders. You have these reminders that, and one of the reasons that the Vietnam War is when a lot of people woke up and was like, "This is fucked up," is because it was televised. It was the first war where there were people on the front lines showing the pain and agony and death that these people were going through, and they could see the faces of the people in their hometowns and what they're really experiencing. And that's when people were like, holy shit, like it gave you a realistic look at war. And then Ken Burns takes that a step further, and we see this other side. Even like what's going on in the Ukraine every day. Like every morning I get up and you read the paper and you read what's going on in Ukraine and Russia or whatever. You start to get, because it's so far away, you just start to get away from reading about the casualties and how many people dying on both sides and how much pain, and so, this makes sense that one of the things in terms of waking people up is like this man with a cat. And it's just like this, it's a very human element of this guy that, loves this cat and he's connected to it, but he can't even wash his hands because they don't have water to wash his hands.
So the problem with making stories for entertainment is Americans especially. I mean, I think this is true in a lot of places in the world, but Americans especially, our culture was raised on the idea of the lone gunman rides into town, shoots all the bad guys, unilateral justice, right? Dispenses justice from the end of his gun, and rides out of town and viewing that as a good thing, right? Like the Lone Ranger or the Clint Eastwood character, that these are good things. And like you said, old war movies made no attempt to humanize the Japanese or the Germans, right? They were the Axis powers. They were the enemy. It was good when they caught on fire and blew up. That was awesome, right? And I think we've very much internalized that. And I think there is a deep discomfort in American viewers when you tell a story that presents both sides of a conflict. That's not the easy entertainment that we come looking for. And so there's a risk you take when you tell those kinds of stories in entertainment, where you show both sides of a story, or you show, look, yeah, these guys are the enemy right now, but they're not monsters. They're not robots. We shouldn't feel good about killing them. We should feel bad about that. We might be forced to do it by the circumstances, but we shouldn't take joy in it, right? That is a risk. And one of the complaints we got from a certain element of the audience was that things like, Philip not being punished for what he did was, he should have been killed. He should have died because he did these terrible things. Showing the humanity of the people on Marco's crew was sort of a betrayal. Like, well, they killed a bunch of Earthers, so we shouldn't see them as humans. It's a style of storytelling that I particularly like, but it is a risky style of storytelling for a mass audience, because there's going to be an element of that audience that does not want that, does not want to hear the other side of the story. If you try to make movies about how Iraqis suffered during the Gulf Wars, those movies do not tend to do well. We as Americans, we don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
We don't want to know that side of the story. We want to think we went over there and kicked ass and it was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're
very uncomfortable with the other side of the story.
Gum and kicked ass. It really depends on the story, because there are some stories where there is the clear good guy and clear bad guy. Like a way that George Lucas did it is he created the Stormtrooper, right? So it's the faceless kind of nameless guys that could be killed, and you don't have that emotional impact, or
He made them space Nazis.
Yeah, exactly.
And the one way you can have a clear bad guy is you make them Nazis.
Like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Like they're they're the best bad guys, because you're like, yeah,
they are the safest bad guy you can
like,
have.
Fuck those guys. Yeah, I get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's sympathetic to Nazis, and if somebody is sympathetic to Nazis, fuck them too.
Fuck you too. Now, but meaning like, or even Starship Troopers, where you have like bugs. Stuff. So they
were just big bugs.
But are you attracted to stories as well? There is a clear good guy and a clear bad guy, and you're like, you want the good guy to kill the bad guy.
There are circumstances where that is the right story.
Yeah, I guess my question, I'm going to ask. Yeah, I want to know if you like those. But when you sit down to write, is there ever any of those good guy bad guy stories that you want to write? Are you always interested in this nuanced, complex, new good guy bad guy thing?
I think I'm uncomfortable with black and white stories, because I've found so few of them in real life. In terms of you creating, or you even consuming as a consumer. Well, creating. I think I'm uncomfortable creating black and white stories, because they don't feel real to me. The Nazis were bad, and the people who ran the Nazi government were fucking sociopaths. I'm glad they are all destroyed. But, I know a bunch of German people, and I have met Germans whose grandparents were alive during World War II. And they've talked about, their grandparents, the only media they ever consumed was the stuff Goebbels was putting out, right? Because he had a massive propaganda machine. Everything that was on the radio, every TV show, or they didn't have TV shows, but everything that was on the radio, every movie they saw at a theater, was produced by Goebbels. But if you were a German in that time, the Nazi high command, if you were Reinhard Heydrich, you were a fucking sociopath and you deserved to die. But there were a lot of people who lived in Germany who were making German tank parts or farmers or whatever, who had a very skewed view of what was going on in the world that was sold to them by propagandists. I don't think we should feel good about killing those people. I think we should feel bad about killing those people. I think they were on the wrong side, but there are very good reasons why they didn't understand that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
but in order to stop the consequences of their leadership succeeding, you still have to drop bombs on factories, and some of the people in those factories are going to be people who are not bad people. Yes, and that's what I'm saying is that's my point was that, like, sometimes circumstances are going to force you to do something like that. But I also think that it's okay to be uncomfortable with it. I think it's okay to feel bad about it. I think it's okay to regret the lives that were lost, even when you feel like the cause was justified. I think that's okay. And I'm very uncomfortable with people who refuse to do that, who refuse to see the world through that lens, who, like, they want everything to be black hats and white hats. Black hats deserve to die, and we never think twice about it. And white hats deserve to kill them and should never face consequences for it. And I think a lot of the bad stuff that's going on in our country right now is because of our unwillingness to view these things through a nuanced lens. Cops are good guys, so of course when cops shoot people, that person must have been a bad guy. And when you really look at it, it's like, no, that's not always true. And we should be uncomfortable with cops shooting people, and we should look into it, and we should try to find out the truth instead of just accepting the story. Yeah, I think, once you get to extremes, the more simplistic your thinking gets. The more you think you are more zealous in your belief that you have the key and the right answer, and that those people don't, and they're less than you or they're worse than you. But these philosophical questions is what I'm interested in. These conversations is what's very interesting to me. That's why I always ask those questions about if you can murder this person. And I feel like this episode does that because Peaches has a conversation with Holden, and she says to Holden, you should never feel bad about not killing somebody, right? And so I thought about that, and I think about it, and I'm like, is there a situation where I would feel bad about not killing somebody? In the grand scheme of things, and how everything kind of comes together, is there righteous killings?
I think circumstances can definitely, you can always create a scenario, right? Like, you've got a rifle in your hands, and 100 feet away is a guy with a knife who's about to stab a 4-year-old girl in the throat.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't shoot him with that rifle, he's going to stab her in the throat. And there's no way you could run that 100 yards to get to him, to stop him without killing him. There's no way to do that. And if you shoot him in the leg, that might not stop him from stabbing her. So the only way for you to stop him is to shoot him in the head and instantly kill him so he can't stab it. And yes, you can create that scenario, that very unlikely scenario. And when you look at that, you go, yes, in that case, obviously, you shoot the guy in the head, you stop him from killing the little girl.
But the thing is, this is why I love The Expanse, because The Expanse asks these questions. And these are the questions I'm interested in, because I feel like if I give you that question and you and I talk about it, I know so much more about you. I know so much more about how people think and who they are as a person, what their character is, what their dignity is, and where their morality lies. Morality is a complicated thing, and it really comes down to what you value and what in the structure of your values. And that's what I think what The Expanse does is always challenge. It doesn't let you rest. It's always challenging you. It's always like, oh, okay, I'm going to root for this and fuck these other guys. And it's like, well, fuck, well, these guys are, and then they're now that he's doing this, and and so that's why I can do a podcast on this show and talk about it, endlessly, because it's asking those questions and the things that I'm interested in.
I think I think those are the interesting philosophical questions, the one, the kind you bring up there, and there is no simple answer. There's no. It's not like there is a right answer to that question. Think if somebody had gone back in time and murdered Alexander the Great before he got started, I think the world looks very different
Exactly.
today. I think he had an outsized impact on the world. I think if somebody had gone back in time and murdered Octavian before he became emperor after Julius.
Alexander the Great is a great example. That was a very good example because he was very unique and he had an outsized impact on his people and on the world. I mean, or even Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan.
I think if somebody goes back and murders Genghis Khan in his crib, the world looks very different today. So I agree that there's some people just have an outsized impact. That is
Joseph,
true.
I wonder how much of this podcast you're going to edit or how much are the people going to find interesting. All right, introduce our top 5.
Alrighty, we have top limb-losing moments in movies. So in honor of Sammer Joseph's character getting his arm amputated by Michio, we have a pretty fun list that the patrons kind of worked up.
Dude, Dylan, when his arm gets sliced off and it's still fucking, and the gun's still going off in his hand is awesome. And I would throw that up there.
Well, Dylan had been pushing too many pencils. If that blast had hit Arnold's arm, it would have just bounced off.
Yeah, it would have bounced off and then shot back at the Predator. That's how much bounce he had in his arm. You've been pushing too many pencils. Oh, Evil Dead 2. God, that's a great scene. We got to do Evil Dead 2 at some point, or Evil Dead. We should do the whole Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. Early Sam Raimi is fantastic.
Oh, these are great. I love the Romance in the Stone, Luke Skywalker's hand, which we probably have to, it's such an important moment that we probably have to do that.
Oh, wow. There's a deep cut. Somebody's got the jackal on there. When Bruce Willis shoots Jack Black's arm off with that huge, what is it, like 37 millimeter cannon or whatever.
And then
that's my addition.
I think that's Jack Black's first ever movie scene
where he's playing the guy who's building the little remote control.
Yeah.
So RoboCop, he gets lit up. I mean, they start out by shooting his hand off. But they keep shooting him. They blow his arm off. They light his ass up.
That is that is a fucking dude. They murder, even though they don't murder him, but they murder him. And that RoboCop is one of those movies where it was like, whoa, I've never seen violence like this. When you're a kid and you're watching it, it's along the lines like the first time you see the Terminator, and you're like, Jesus Christ,
Oh, that early scene when what's the guy's name? The executive who gets lit up by the Ed 209.
Oh, what is that?
I can't remember what his name is, but the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I'm watching a different kind of thing here. I'd seen blood squibs before. I had never seen that level of blood squib.
RoboCop will be an interesting movie to talk about because it has such a unique, interesting tone. And for that time, it was the first thing I've ever seen anything like it. You know how it kind of did the news reports and the way that it did Detroit, the style and look and the future of what it was going to be and how violent and rough and raw and how tough the cops were. But yeah, what are those? The future robot?
ED-209, enforcement droid. Most people don't know that ED stands for enforcement droid.
Sin City, when they take all his arms and legs off, he was a spooky character in Sin City. Elijah Wood.
So I had read the comics before that movie came out, and I remember, his character's name is Kevin, the creepy cannibal character, and I had read that issue of Sin City where Marvin goes after Kevin, and so I knew that whole story. And when they announced that Elijah Wood, the very first trailer, it was such a great trailer. It was so stylized and had that fantastic song. The trailer had like great music. And I remember watching it, and I saw Elijah Wood come in with Kevin's little round glasses, because they were the glasses he wore in the comic too. And I remember thinking, how on earth is Frodo Baggins going to play this super creepy, scary cannibal character? I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it. Then I watched the movie, And I was like, Elijah Wood was the best
Oh my
thing in
God.
this movie.
He was so good.
so
That
great.
character was fascinating.
And from then on, I was a believer in Elijah Wood. Like, I was like, oh, he's not just Frodo Baggins. That guy can actually do whatever he wants to do. And from ever since then, I've really enjoyed everything he's been in. So that movie, Sin City, was the movie that convinced me that Elijah Wood was more than just a one-shot talent.
It resurrected Mickey Rourke for me too. I thought he was so good in that.
Absolutely. As Marv, he was amazing as Marv.
Good as Marv. That was my favorite character. One thing that's missing from this is Swamp Thing. When he got his arm chopped off and he had to put it in the sunlight, you know, and it started growing back. I want to show my kids Swamp Thing, but I can't, you know, I'm scared because it was a Superstation movie for me. But was there like nudity or is it scary?
Yeah, Adrienne Barbeau gets topless in it.
I have to watch it just for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, she is a woman of impressive talents.
Okay. Predator, Evil Dead 2, Star Wars. Are you a Swamp Thing guy? Were you a fan of that movie?
I'm not, but mostly because I had read the comics and I was I was angry that they got so much stuff wrong from the comics. Yeah. I was like the comic nerd who was like, Swamp Thing isn't right. That's not how it works.
So I've been trying to read. I want to show my kids Swamp Thing, so I got the comics and I've been reading the comics to them. And again, man, I mean, like, was everything in the 80s and the 70s just like pure sex and boobs and I mean they have sex scenes in the comics, you know, and they have all that. So I was like, God, I can't read these comics to you, man.
I know you're a Tarantino fan. I'm a huge Kill Bill fan. So I would definitely put the bride whacking off Sophie Patel's arm in Kill Bill. Because it's so shocking when it happens, and then it's followed up by the scene later where she's got Sophie in her trunk and she's threatening her, and Sophie won't talk, and she just goes, "Give me that other arm," and she reaches for her other arm, and you're like, "Fuck!" That movie, like, you know, you're supposed to root for the bride because she got fucked over at her wedding and stuff, but she's just as much of a bad guy as anybody else in that film, man.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's definitely one that's going to go there. It was such an impactful scene. Black Death, Sean Bain.
So he's got this one is for you, Wes. Joseph put this one on here for you with the see you at the party, Richter.
Oh, Total Recall? Yeah.
You know that one is just for you.
You at the party, Richter. Should we put that up there? Let's see if there's anything that can beat it. So Shooter, Sin City, Saw, Warzy, Deep Blue, Forrest Gump. Dude, I'm an unabashed Forrest Gump fan. Forrest Gump and Lieutenant Dan's relationship moves me every time I watch it, but I can understand if that doesn't make the list.
Well, but it's not really an on-screen though. It's
when he loses his legs.
We see him get blown up. Yeah, we see him get blown up, and Forrest carries him back to the camp, but then he just shows up later without legs.
I might go. I know we already have a Tarantino on there, but Reservoir Dogs. You know, I was not expecting when he cut that policeman's ear off. I was so not expecting that, and it jumped from the genre that it was in, and it went somewhere darker. And you realize, like, oh my God, this guy's a sociopath, right? And that was
now again though that is entirely off screen.
But doesn't he hold the ear and show them the ear or throw it at them?
He's holding the ear afterwards, but the cutting off part is all off screen.
But you see him go for it, right? And you see him sawing, right?
You see him go in, and he's got the razor blade in his hand, and then the camera moves so that we're behind his back. And then when it comes around the other side, he's holding the ear.
So
it's all off
count
camera.
That though.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't count it. I'm just saying it's one of those scenes that's way less gory in reality than people remember it.
See, I count that. Well, to me, it happening where you can't see it and then see the aftermath is more gory to me because of what's happening in your emotion and the shock of seeing the ear because you don't really know what he's doing. But like if you take...
because what's happening in your head is always worse than what you see on the screen.
Right, because like if you take Romance in the Stone, I don't think you see the guy's hand get bit off. You just see him later. He has an issue with the shark.
No, you see the crocodile clamp.
Oh, that's
on
right.
it.
Yeah.
When he grabs the gem and he's holding it over the pit, and then you just see the crocodile grab his hand. So you do see that one get bit off.
for me, in terms of impact of the movie, and like Reservoir Dogs had a strong impact on me, and it's a turn in the movie. It was important to the plot. Important in the tonally. So that I would put that up there. So Predator is very nostalgia one. Evil Dead 2. Like if we look at just like in Luke's hand getting cut off is really important to the plot, to the movie. 120 hours. What did you think? 127 hours. I actually never saw that movie because the premise did not interest me.
It's a well-made movie. It's well made. I know people are, not all in agreement on James Franco, but I actually think James Franco is very good at it. The problem with it is the guy is an idiot. And so you're kind of like, stupid guy gets in the obvious thing happens to a stupid guy, and then he has to like cut his own arm off. That to me makes it not a great movie, because the whole time I was just like, yeah, idiot. If you hadn't done any of the things you did, you wouldn't be in this situation. Like I'm not sitting here going, oh, look how brave you are for cutting your arm off.
And dumb behavior really takes you out of a movie. I've noticed that. Like,
it does.
If you're watching a horror movie and they do dumb stuff, it just really just takes you out of it.
Yep.
Like, that's a pet peeve of yours. So I just want to say my favorite present this Christmas was this wonderful little Lego sample of us doing the podcast. And I want to thank Belle and Kevin. They're the most fantastic. They're so Ty, you don't deserve fans like this. I do. Me and Joseph do, but you don't, Ty. And this made when I opened this, it just made me laugh, and it gives me joy every time I look at it. Like, look at your little hair and your little beard.
I know the hair is great.
And then it's got the Ty and the guy, and it's got the alien and the Die Hard, and it's just and whoever that guy is, like a mugshot of that guy. This was just really well done, and this is a great gift, and I want to thank you, Belle and Kevin, for the time that you put into this. This was really great. When Ty gets shelves, he's going to put it on display.
I have mine as well. I don't have any shelves behind me yet, but when I do, it'll wind up there. So thank you from me too. It's actually sitting over on the shelf over there right now, off camera.
All right, Ty's got to go get rid of a dead possum. If it's fresh, I don't know. Might want to YouTube some soup. Possum soup.
Nah, somebody already took a bite out of this possum.
Is it human teeth? Is it a human bite? That'd be more interesting.
It would be interesting. I don't know. I haven't examined
it
up close.
What if it was a human? Like when you go right now to take the possum away, and you being a horror movie professor, how would you handle that situation? So
so to begin with, I'm not going to take like a plaster mold of the injury and then examine it to see what kind of creature created it. I'm not going to be doing it. You can tell
what a mouth bite is and what an animal bite is. You know what a mouth bite looks like. So what if you show up and it is clearly a mouth bite? That somebody killed and ate a possum in your yard. What is your next step?
Well, they only took one bite.
Well, maybe the possum wasn't good, but one bite is enough. Like one human bite out of, you don't look at it and say, this guy probably wasn't crazy because it wasn't more than one bite. Maybe this. So what if it was one big bite, human bite out of the possum? What do you do next?
I still just throw it away.
But aren't you now suspicious?
What am I supposed to do?
Like, are you going to take more precautions with your house? Like, are you going to be like, is it going to freak you out at all? Are you going to be like, if you were in a horror movie, what would be the next step?
If I was in a horror movie and I found a possum with a bite out of it?
Okay,
I don't know.
This is the beginning. So our challenge is when we do our short film on my property out here, the challenge is like, it starts off with, we find a possum and there's a human
with a bite out of it.
A human mouth-sized bite out of this possum. And then we'll see where that goes from there.
Yeah.
All right. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.